Requirements in ALM, a short practical demo. My name is Andre Herbs, and I'm one of the co-leaders of the Vivid South Africa chapter. I live and work in Cape Town, South Africa. I work for Fujima in the enterprise service management space. This webinar series is brought to you by the Vivid South Africa chapter and the Testing, Quality and Application Lifecycle Management Special Interest Group. The South Africa chapter is led by Mihai Grigorescu and myself. The TQA SIG is led by Chris Scherer, Ollie Leo, Andreas Berg, and Bernard Simzak. To join the South Africa chapter and the Vivid TQ Special Interest Group, go to the South Africa chapter page and the TQA Special Interest page on the Vivid website and click Join Group icon. Your input is welcome on new topics. Some housekeeping. Today's live session is intended for all Vivid members, and the recording will be posted on Vivid's webinar section on the website for all Vivid members. If you have questions as we go along, please type and send them in using the questions pane in the webinar control panel. Here is a picture of the GoToWebinar control panel. That usually appears in the upper right-hand corner of your screen. To submit a question, make sure the questions pane is expanded and type in your questions and click on send. So let's get started. I will turn it over to Mia.
Good day, everyone. Hello. Good day, everyone. My name is Mihai Grigorescu, and thank you, Andre, for the introduction. I will be your host for today, and I will be taking you through a short incursion into the ALM space. I've been working in the testing industry for the last 5 years, and ALM has been my weapon of choice. So obviously, I will take you through everything that I can take you through within this short time frame. Okay, so this is what we're going to go through today. I'm going to give you a bit of general information on this session, and then I'm going to take you through the actual presentation and a live demo from my laptop. We will finish up the session with a question and answers exercise. Andre will take your questions, so please post your questions on the meeting panel, and we will come back with your answer to your questions. All right, so let's start off. General information on this session. We are doing this session as a follow-up from another event, which is the Managing Requirements in ALM, Avoid 10 Common Pitfalls. For those of you who have attended that session, you will know what I'm referring to. I will pick up in one of the slides later on where we left off in the previous one. The recording can be found in this link. Okay, so if you need it, you will be able to get it from there. As soon as we have this webinar recorded, you can just email us, myself, Andre, Stephanie, and the rest of the people at Vivid, and we'll be gladly give you the new link for this webinar for this one today. Okay, just to set some rules straight, I would like to point out what this webinar is and what this webinar isn't. So let's set up the expectations up front. This is just an informal demonstration of some of the features in ALM 11.5. And the demonstration that I'm going to do is also applicable mostly for versions 10 and versions 11. This is going to be a very short practical demonstration because we have a very limited amount of time and we have lots and lots of features to go through. Unfortunately, we can't go through everything, but we will try to get through to as much as possible. And the webinar itself, it's aimed at beginner and entry-level ALM users. So if you have a lot of experience and a lot of exposure in ALM, you are more than welcome to sit on the webinar, but if it doesn't bring any value to you, it's up to you whether you choose to stay or not. Okay. The aim for this whole webinar is to raise awareness on the general features of application lifecycle management and to generally help you out in your day-to-day work if possible. Okay, this is not a training, official or otherwise, from HP. This is not the aim of this webinar. Okay, as I said, we're not targeting the advanced and experienced users, but if you are one of them, you're more than welcome to stay on the line. And with 11.5, we will not be looking at this at the other new features in this current version, which is Printer Alley, SAP integrators, and so on and so forth. We will only be focusing on requirements module and requirements management. All right. So, if you have any queries for us with regards to tool assessments, I've developed a tool assessment for ALM in particular, which is not available anywhere else in the world. Or if you're looking for software testing in general, in terms of ALM and your processes as well, or if you like more webinars, either public or private, this is who you need to contact, mainly Andre or myself. We have our email addresses here, so feel free to contact us at any point in time, and we'll gladly point you towards the right direction, either towards HP, or we will organize together with Vivid some other forms of events to help you and to support you going forward. Okay, and enough talking now for the information in general. Let's talk about where we left off and what are we going to do tonight. By the way, in South Africa it's now 6 o'clock in the evening, so that's why I'm mentioning it tonight. All right, this is where we left off from the old webinar, and as you can see on this screen, you're just about to see it now. There we go. Okay, we talked about why manage requirements and why is it so important to use proper requirements management within quality center and within your organization. And the simplest answer to that is because everything that you do revolves around quality translates into money. And if you don't manage them properly, you will end up losing a lot of money. As you can see on the right-hand side, we have the Capers-Jones software quality hazards in all industries, and we can see how much of money have been lost and invested and lost in IT projects that have gone haywire. Therefore, very important. We need to manage our requirements very seriously. Okay, and also because, and most of you will know this this caricature, because we don't want to wind up in this situation where the product marketing specifies something, salesman promises something else, and so on and so forth, and this is not what the customer wanted. This is a very good analogy because in most of the projects that I've worked for, and I'm sure that you people out there have also encountered it a lot of times, you start with an IT project, you develop, you test, you implement, and then right at the very end, when you do user acceptance testing and you implement the application into production, you realize that it's not what the end users have requested. So it's very important that you involve everyone in the requirements management process. That being said, let's move on to the next one. If you recall, for the people that have been on the last webinar, this was our conclusion, or my conclusion, pointing out to you from the last exercise. In here, we said what were the 10 pitfalls, and in this demonstration tonight, I will try and put into practice what I have preached last time. In other words, I'll try and do exactly what I said in here is the best practice. Okay, so if we look at the 10 pitfalls here, we said that we need to use requirements. We need to use requirements across all teams, make them very simple to capture, very easy to track, have a workflow in the back of our minds on how to support our requirement management modeling process. We need to use version control, RBQM, which is risk-based quality management. We have to use release planning and management, and we have to use different views for the requirements, such as coverage analysis, in order to track down the quality of our application, of our product over the time. The only thing that we will not be looking at tonight is using Ali and any other third-party tool integrator. So we will not be looking at that. We'll be just looking at the basic functionality of ALM. As I said, this is applicable for version 10 upwards. For the people out there using version 9.2 or 9, this is not going to benefit you at all. Okay, now let's look at, just stepping back a bit, and let's look at the STLC, which is the software testing lifecycle. Many of you are very familiar with these. The top side is representing the lifecycle as per the ISTQB materials and syllabus, and it's just depicting your normal waterfall approach. Whether you use waterfall or V model or W or whatever the case is, anything that is a staggered approach, this will apply to you. This whole demonstration is not necessarily applicable to Agile users. So it is in some ways applicable to them, but it is not aimed at Agile teams. For Agile, speaking of which, you will have to use with application lifecycle management other tools such as Agile Accelerator or the new upcoming Horizon, which will be unveiled in Frankfurt for HP Discover. So Horizon is a third-party application developed by HP using quality sensor code and quality sensor technology, and it's primarily aimed at developers, and it's primarily aimed at Agile teams. So everything in there revolves around Agile. Something that you should definitely look at if you are in an Agile environment. Okay, coming back to our webinar, as I said, we are only looking at the V model and the waterfall in principle. Okay, we all know what these phases in a project are, which is analysis, planning, design, and then execution and completion, overlapping from the inception to completion by test management and control and reporting and infrastructure. The one diagram at the bottom right is the same thing expressed in a different way. That is TMAP. For the people who are not familiar with it, it's mostly the same thing. Everybody does the same thing. Everybody does analysis, everybody does planning, everybody does design, then execution, and then conclusion. So in that term, we are all alike. We will do that at some degree and at some stage in the project lifecycle. If we move on to the next slide and we look at what features will we be using from ALM, I've just put them in. Remember, this is not exclusive to or inclusive of the features not being used in all these stages. This is just for descriptive purposes only. We will be using, for the requirements extraction and design, we'll be using the requirements module within Quality Center. So we will capture all our requirements in there using RBQM, risk-based quality management, using VC, which is version control. Then we will be using release management as well to further down our planning and to go deeper down into the execution phase. We will be using coverage analysis from that perspective. We'll be looking at status and progress and quality progress. And overall, for the reporting and for the management and control of the project, we'll be using reports and dashboards. Okay, for this purpose, I haven't created too much of dashboards and too much of reports, but you will see when we get there. Okay, so now let's meet the team. We have a special selection for you. Special thanks to goes to my wife, who created these guys over the weekend. You'll see now what I mean. Firstly, we will have our project manager. So these are the minions of the project. This guy's name is Enrique. I think his mustache tells it all. He's our project manager. And usually what the project manager is doing in a project involving testing, they're always stingy with the cash. They always tell us to cut down the testing time in half, and they always increase the scope without moving the deadline to the right. We all know how it goes. The purpose of this demonstration is what can we do for the project manager to help him or her out with ALM. The next guy we have on the list here is, and let me just wait for the image to pop up, is Nelson. He's our test manager. Normally in real life and in projects, that would be me over here with the football cap on. to prevent further injuries to the head. Our role is simple as test managers. We need to manage the testing team within the budget and the scope provided by the project manager, and after the project gets implemented, to take the fall for any bugs going into production. I'm sure everybody agrees this is the case. Okay. As a disclaimer, obviously the unofficial role is just for humor purposes, and it's not what a project manager should do in real life, or a test manager should do in real life. I'm sure you've realized that by now. Let's move on to the next people in the list. We have then the developer. His name is Kevin, and he will be developing the application for us based on the business requirement specification, which is indicated here by the abbreviation BRS, or functional requirement specification. In here, the term is largely used, can be creative and use whatever you want to. He gets a document from the business analyst, and he will be doing the code, and that's pretty much it. Okay. We then have the actual business analyst, whose name is Melvin. Notice the fact that their names go very well hand in hand together, Kevin and Melvin, almost like the Three Stooges. Okay, so Melvin is our business analyst, and he is developing the business requirement specification and any other documentation that is required in the project. We all know in projects, business analysts like to create very large amounts of documents, and they like to create lots of diagrams. And then when these two come together, the developer and the business analyst, then we at least have an idea what the application will look like, how it will behave, what are its features and functionality, and then we can move on to the testing side of things. So these are the guys. Then we will be talking about the tester. His name is Stallone, and the mouth says it all. If you have seen Expendables, you will know what I mean. He's going to test the application within budget and time under the careful eye of the test manager, and most of the times he will be the target of everyone else for things going wrong and being blamed for everything. Sometimes he shares the blame with the test manager. Hint for the apple on his head. Okay, so Stallone will be doing some stuff for us today as well in our demonstration. And then last but not least, we have our regular user. His name is Billy Bob. He is our happy-go-lucky end user who will be using the application. And usually what happens in real life is the people on the ground ask for A and B, they receive C and D as features, and then plus some extra other features that they have never heard of or never expected. But the main point is they never ever receive what they have asked for to begin with. Okay, so this is our team, and I hope you enjoyed the little bit of humor. Now we'll be going to the live demo, and this is how HP provides us with the best practice on how to use application lifecycle management. And for those of you who don't know ALM, we have to release specifications, so we have to do the release management module. We have to do work in there, specify the releases and the cycles, followed by capturing and extracting requirements, which is the second block in here, requirement specifications, followed by creating test cases in the test plan, which is, as the name indicates, test planning, after which we take the requirements or the test cases from the test plan into the test lab in order to be executed. So that's your test execution. And finally, completing with defect tracking. So in all of this, you start logging defects, and if you're lucky, all of them will be linked in between, and all of them will have complete traceability and full visibility between these records. So that's how HP's best practice is actually telling us how to do things. We will be looking at requirement specification in particular, and we will be looking at just one or two features from the release specifications block. So the first two blocks only. That's the only thing we're going to touch tonight. All right. So this is the main page. This is the flow. We have our different stakeholders in the project here. As I introduced them before, we have the project manager, test manager, business analyst, developer, tester, and end user. Each of them will perform an action, and as they perform an action, I will log into Quality Center and I will do that particular action. Unfortunately, since I came to realize yesterday when we were doing a quick dry run for this webinar that it is very time consuming to actually log in and log out with these different credentials. I will only be doing the individual login for the first two steps, and then thereafter I will continue with only one super user, which is a TD admin for the project, so as we don't waste time on logging out and logging back in and so on and so forth. Okay, so just to start up, usually the project manager provides estimations in terms of budget and time to the project sponsors. The test manager also provides some thumbsuck testing estimations. ISTQB tells us that method is called FIA, finger in the air. So we all know it's more of a guesstimate process there. And the business analyst finally, eventually produces a BRS, which he or she then provides to the project team. And this is where we're going to start. Okay, so the first things we're going to do in Quality Center now is we're going to capture some functional requirements, and we're going to use RBQM in order to perform a risk analysis on those functional requirements. Okay, I'm going to log now into my application lifecycle management. Okay, I have to log out. I will be logging now with the BA's name, which is Melvin. Okay, and Melvin has this particular BRS in here. So I actually used one of my old BRSs from my long time ago projects. Okay, and this is how your usual BRSs look like. Okay, they have, if I go to the summary line, you've got a lot of version control, and you got table of contents and showing the diagrams and so on and so forth. So essentially what I'm saying in here is you need to take your BAs and have them capture their requirements straight into Quality Center. It'll save them a lot of time. Whether they're using Word document on a SharePoint site or whether they will be only working in Quality Center, that's really up to you and your organization and your team. For this instance, I'm going to use just an example from the requirements section. And I'm just going to go to, let's go here, general requirements. Just bear with me for a second while it goes there. Okay, and now we have a particular table written by the business analyst saying these are my general requirements for the developer to go and code for me. Okay, so we're going to take the first one. We're going to say what do we want to do as a general requirement. We want to have the functionality and the ability to handle exceptions. So I'll just take one, the main name here for ability to handle exceptions, and now I'm logging into Quality Center, right? So in Quality Center, I will be looking, let me just get rid of this thing. Please note that this project is actually version controlled, so it means everything that I do here will have to be checked in and checked out. Checked in means that it's ready for consumption. Checked out, it means it's still edited by someone. So I'm just going to create my new folder name here, Melvin's new requirements. Okay, and under Melvin's new requirements, I'm going to create a new requirement, which is going to be functional. And the requirement name, I'm just going to copy paste what I've taken from the Word document. We now should be able to see there we go, be able to see my screen. So in Quality Center, I'm capturing ability to handle exceptions requirements, which is a functional type. Author is Melvin, the rest of the field will be captured automatically. And under description, either I capture my own text or simply I just go in here and I just copy paste from the Word document back into Quality Center whatever I want to. For the people who are not aware of the Rich Text Formats tab in Quality Center, you are always able to capture everything from a Word document. So I'm just going to go back to the Word document and copy paste this whole block, this whole table. And I'm going to go back to Quality Center and I'm going to paste it as is. As you will notice, the Rich Text tab will actually contain all the formatting and all the tables and everything that you have in Word document. In other words, it's pretty easy to take a Word document, a functional specification, and put it into Quality Center as a functional requirement, piece by piece, bit by bit, or just one piece of document at a time. Okay, so this is how it looks. I have all the information that I need for now. I'm just going to hit submit. Okay, I'm not going to submit another requirement for now. What I said in my slideshow here is what I'm going to do as a business analyst, as Melvin mainly. I'm going to capture a functional requirement, and I'm also going to perform a risk analysis. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to my application lifecycle management, to Quality Center, and I'm going to go into the details of these requirements. Okay. So under description, I have what this particular requirement is supposed to happen. In my comment section, I will add a comment, and let's say, for instance, I will address this to Kevin, my developer. Kevin, please check A, B, and C. It doesn't really matter. I'm not going to go into too much details. I'm just going to show you the principle behind it and how you need to capture everything. Okay, so I've captured comments, I've captured description. I know everything that is to know about this requirement. The only thing I haven't done for the moment is to look at the risk. So I'm going to go to the risk tab in here, and as you can see now, the assessment results is empty. It does not have a grading. Okay, so I'm going to go to the assessment questions, and now you have to pay extra careful attention. These assessment questions are split into 3 different tabs, which is business criticality, failure probability, and functional complexity. It's basically your risk, which is impact times probability, rate of impact times impact probability. The HP team has added functional complexity as well to the whole mix. Unfortunately, I've never used it in real life, but I have used the other 2 tabs, which is business criticality and failure probability. So in this tab, I will just capture what type of process it is, and note that all these questions are customizable. So you need somebody with a lot of Quality Center experience to go back into the customization side of the project, into the back end, and do these calculations for you, and then set them up for you to be applicable for your particular project and your particular team. Everything in here is customizable. So I'm just going to capture a few values here to answer these assessment questions. And yeah, oops, there we go. Okay. So I'm just going to put everything as critical. So I'm just going to choose the highest of values in here. The impact of failure will be legal, which is the worst case scenario. Frequency will be of use will be very often, and number of users will be many or high. As soon as I'm done with this value selection from these fields, then you will notice at the bottom here that the calculated business criticality is a critical. Now I'm done with the business criticality tab as a BA. My name is Melvin, if you remember. Okay, and I'm going to go now to the failure probability. Remember, this risk assessment can be done either by business analyst, either by the developer, or by the tester itself, or by an SME, or by anyone else who has deep knowledge of the project environment as well as your application. So it doesn't really matter who's doing it. This is just for demonstration purposes. I'm doing it as a VA. So change type, I'll choose it's a new feature. So high probability of defects being found in there. Software maturity will be, let's say, immature. So we don't have a team that's very mature in coding and producing high quality applications. Defect rates will be high. This can be looked at from various projects. So what is the defect detection rate for this particular project, for this particular team, for this particular type of project or application. Okay, so just capture that in there, and how many affected screens or entities are out there. So just more than 4. Okay, again, as soon as I finish capturing all these four values, I get my calculated failure probability, which is 1 high. I'm going to do exactly the same thing on the functional complexity, so I'm just going to choose them very quickly so we don't waste any more time on this tab. And again, as soon as I finish, it gives me again 1 high at the bottom. If I go back into the assessment results tab, in the original tab that we started off with, we will notice that the risk is A high. Okay, so this is actually the risk that is associated with this particular requirement. In other words, for the project, this is a very high risk requirement and must be treated as such. Okay, so in here, notice that we have our assessment questions. You can also exclude the requirement from the analysis or use your own custom scoring. We also have the estimated development time, which is an optional field, but obviously for the demonstration purposes, this will not be captured by the BA. However, now the BA has finished, so Melvin has finished doing his capturing of his requirements. So now, in order for him to leave this requirement in another team member's hands, he needs to check this particular entity in. If you notice now, it shows in here. We are seeing a green lock icon in here, which shows that this entity is available only for my editing. If Kevin or Nelson or whoever else, any other team member logs in now at this particular moment in time into the project, they will not be able to edit this particular requirement. So therefore, I will have to check in my requirements. Along with that, I will actually do my folder as well. Okay, so I'm going to say check in. I'm not going to put any comments in here. And that's it. So in other words, now I've captured the new requirement, I've assessed its risk, and I use version control to check it in. I'm going to log out, and this is the last time I'm logging out. Afterwards, I will be just logging in with local admin. So now I'm just going to log in with Kevin, who is the developer. And now Kevin has been set in the workflow to receive an email. Obviously for this webinar's purposes, we're not looking at the emails. Okay, so I see here now that this particular requirement, which doesn't have any test cases associated with it, has been assigned to me. Okay, this is the description. If I look at the rich text tab, I can also see the rest of the information in the tab. Okay, I'm scrolling up, scrolling down. I read everything that I need. I look at the comments, and I see Melvin's comments in here telling me, please go and check A, B, and C. So I'm going to add my own comments. Notice now that as soon as I click to add comment, it will have to, the record will be checked out to me. So again, version control kicks in. I will be the only one available to make changes to this particular record. Everyone else will be left on the outside. The reason for that is if you want to reinforce a strong policy for requirements management, version control would be it. Okay, so I'm not going to capture anything, but it's just going to save this version. I'm going to say here, Melvin, I've checked A, B, and C, A, B, C, and D. Everything looks good. I'll add my development, my dev time required to code this feature. Okay, so I've added everything in here. And now what I need to do is I need to go into the requirement details. Okay, so from here I just either double click or just click on the view requirement details. I'm just going to go into the risk assessments, and I'm going to capture how much of development time do I require. Okay, let's say I need 40 hours. Okay, let me put numlog 40 hours, and that's it. I've added my time. Again, I want other people to work on it, so I will check this this requirement back in. All right, and that is it. So now, if we go back to my presentation, we will see that now we are actually on this slide here where we've reviewed the functional requirement, we've added our comments, and I've added my development time. So what comes next? Well, what comes next is the test manager now, Nelson, will log into Quality Center and will start analyzing all these requirements and what is information coming from RBQM. Okay, and as I said before, I will not log with Nelson now. I will only log with my super user here. Okay, and I will just carry on with this super user to demonstrate further everything else. All right. So this is my view. I'm now the super user. I'm the test manager going in, and I see that Melvin's new requirements folder is here. And if I double click on it, I will be able to see the full history and risk analysis in here as well. Now, I've clicked on risk analysis and notice that in this particular screen, you have absolutely no information. And the reason why we have to play with check-in and check-out is if a requirement is not checked in, therefore it's not editable by any other member of the team, you will not be able to perform this analysis for risk. Okay, so in here I just have to click on the Analyze button up here on top. Okay, it will have to check out to the folder to me, and that is it. We had one single requirement that was created as a high, and you can see it in here. It's showing in here. And at the bottom, you will see that we have analysis constants and we have the numbers for used in determining how many numbers of hours we require for testing. And this is where it gets tricky, because the first time you will ever use this, you will not get the right amount of time. It'll take a bit of practice, but eventually you will get it right. I've used it with my teams, and it took me about a project and a half to actually come up with right estimations. How much of time is required to test a high requirement, how much of time for medium, and how much of time for a low one. And these amount of hours you will actually capture down here in this section, testing time full per functional complexity. If you notice in here, the total required testing time shows 18 hours for one particular requirement which was high, which is obviously this amount here. If I had two, it would have been 36, and so on and so forth. In here you can play around with the number of hours, but for lack of time now, we will not be playing with that anymore. I will show you now. I played around before with this particular folder where we have more. There we go. Where we have more information in. We have 7 requirements, and out of those 7 requirements, we have. Just go here. There we go on the full screen. And on these 4 requirements now, we have the particular requirements. What is the grading, and what is the amount of hours that you require to test them, and how much amount of hours you require from a development perspective. And now this is where the project manager would come in, and now the project manager would then go and reassess the timelines, and he would look at risk-based quality management analysis along with the test manager, and he will also be looking at project planning and tracking. Okay, I have to accelerate my rhythm because we're not going to have enough time to go through everything else. But in principle, this is what the project manager with the test manager will be looking at. Total required development time is 168 hours. If you take these number of hours as duration, divide them by the number of resources you have, so for instance, you have 2 developers in your team, then you would be looking at, let's look at the calculator, you say take 168 hours divided by 2 resources, okay, divided by 40, which is hours per week. You need, in essence, 2.1 weeks in order to develop these particular requirements, and that is a very good estimation as far as estimations go. In terms of testing, you will play around with the numbers here, and the project manager will then say, well, you only have 90 hours to perform this particular this particular testing. Yeah? I'm not going to give you more than 90 hours because that's my budget. So in essence, you'll be able to tell me as well, with those 90 hours, I would only be able to cover only for 66% of your requirements. So in order to do proper requirements, proper risk-based testing, we'll probably focus only from the high going down towards the medium and the low, with a very big chance of the mediums and the lows not being tested. So in essence, what ALM does for you now is it gives you some strong numbers that you can use to negotiate with your project manager the required number of hours and what is it exactly that you need from them. And adversely and conversely, if they don't give you the enough number of hours, what can you do with those number of hours? So this is pretty much where risk-based quality management comes into play. All right, let's move on now to the next slide. What's going to happen now is the developer is going to start developing the code, and now I'm going to log in again as a test manager, and I'm going to look at release management and start making use of dashboards in order to see what happens with my project and start managing the workload for my team. So consider I'm logging in as a test manager now, and I'm going to go to my dashboard. Another feature that they've reintroduced from versions 9 and 10 is the analysis menus in 11.5, whereby you have a set of graphs that are predefined here for you to use. I'm not going to use any of these because I don't use them, and I think they're useless for me. So I've decided to do my own graphs. In my own graphs, I'll be looking at things like direct cover status, which will indicate to me whether I have tests associated with test cases or I don't have test cases associated with requirements. And I'm going to be looking at all other sorts of information. So if you look at a dashboard, I've created one basically looking at direct cover status versus requirement type. Another one which is reviewed or not reviewed, and then looking at the version control status, along with a scorecard that is only available from 11 onwards. The scorecard is only available with the Premier version, mind you, so it will not be available in Enterprise. It's a very good tool, however, because you can just print this scorecard, publish this scorecard somewhere on a SharePoint site, and you don't have to have your project managers coming through and logging into Quality Center and looking at what sort of reports they can extract in order to find out where you are with your project. So scorecard is very, very useful information. If I'm going to click on View now, it's going to generate my reports, and this is how my reports look like. Let me look it up on the screen, and I'm going to change one like this. Okay, close it down. Again. All right, so I have in here the information on my requirements, on direct cover status. Okay, so I have 2 failed requirements, 1 passed requirement, 3 not covered, and so on and so forth. This data automatically updates straight from the requirement section. You don't need to have to do anything for that. On the right-hand side, next to it, it's the exact same graph, but looking at it from a grid perspective. So this is your usual your Excel type of view. So in here we see the requirement types versus the direct cover status on the right-hand side, and we see exactly what's going on. If I wanted to look at the not covered ones, these 3 requirements over here, and tell my team, hey, listen, you guys gotta go and create test cases for them. I'm just going to simply click on that number. It's going to bring me the drill down with the requirement ID, what's the parent, what's the name, who's the author, and I can choose all sorts of information to add in here, whatever I want to. And then I can take this type of information, and this is what I'm using in real life, people. So this is what I'm using in my project when I go around and I tell people, listen, we need to create test cases for these particular requirements. This is what's going to be released next. This is what we need to test. So let's get some test cases covering these requirements. So this is actually how I control the workload. Okay. This was the drill down, and what we're looking at now is this is the dashboard basically, and these are the reports that I'm looking for. You got the scorecards in here, and at the bottom I'm using this this version control graph as well to see what has been reviewed, what has not been reviewed, by end users and what has been checked in and what's being checked out. So this is actually for me to control the flow of information. It's really to control the data in there, but not the actual data in the requirements. This is just to manage the requirements top down. Okay, now we're moving away from the dashboards, and we're going to be looking at release management. So what do we do with release management? And look at this graph. We have requirement 1, requirement 2, and requirement 3 going forward over cycle 1, cycle 2, and cycle 3 being tested. Normally, if you don't use release management, and if you are now in cycle 2, you would want to extract a report on your requirement coverage and the execution coverage, to be precise. In this case, they should be showing failed, no run, and no run. However, because a quality center wasn't designed in this manner, no run being a non-execution status, it will actually show in cycle 2 here that requirement 1 is failed, requirement 2 is passed, and requirement 3 is failed. It will only keep the last execution status. So let's look at how it looks in Quality Center. So if I go to my requirements tab, okay, I'm just going to go to my requirements tree. I'm going to go to release management, and as you can see in here, it says failed, passed, and failed. It's exactly what my grid was showing. Although in my second cycle, I haven't started executing the test cases associated with requirement 2 and requirement 3. So therefore, if I do not manage them through releases, which is here, so cycle 1 and cycle 2 under release management has those particular requirements associated with them, and then this particular cycle is associated with a test lab folder, then I wouldn't be able to get this particular view on the requirements, which is view, and we're looking at coverage analysis. And on the settings, we'll set execution analysis, and we will choose first cycle 1. If you remember my slide, it was pass, pass, fail, so it's going to show me exactly pass, pass, fail for cycle 1. And if I choose cycle 2, it's going to show me the real information on cycle 2 and what happens in there, which is failed and no run, no run. So in other words, it will give me a proper information on where we are with the requirements and how are they doing in those particular cycles. All right? And it's pretty simple. You just, to assign to a release, you just go to the top level folder and you say, let me just put this up. Okay. Oh, they took the context menu out. You can assign a whole folder to a cycle or to a release, and those particular requirements will then be assigned to a specific cycle or release. Okay, this is how it looks, and it's pretty easy to use. Speaking of releases here, of release management, the test manager, being me, with the project manager, the other guy called Enrique, we are going to be looking at the full releases and how they look like in terms of status. On the release side, if you've done everything right, you look at the status, you would be able to see how many days you have left for that particular cycle to be executed, and how much of test cases you have in relation to that cycle. And now remember, all these test cases are associated to requirements, because at the end of the day, you are executing tests to meet specific requirements. You're not just executing tests for the sake of executing tests, right? So in here, this view is actually very used, and the project manager will always be looking at this. If these numbers coincide, the number of days with the progress in total here, then you're on the right track. If they don't coincide, and if your number of days is almost completed and your run percentage is very low, you know you're in trouble, you know you are going to miss your deadline, and so on and so forth. Also, if you have big differences in here between the number of tests and the number of past tests, which is on the graph not showing very neatly now because I have very few numbers of requirements and test cases, then you'll also be in trouble. But this is how release management works, and it's very important that you use it because it'll give you this particular view that you can take back to the project manager and not come stuck when project managers are asking you where are you with your execution, and mostly you're going to say 25%, 50%, 75%. When you see these numbers, you know that they're not actually accurate. But when you do look at quality center and you see, hey, I'm actually on 63% with a 66% of instances runs, then that's exactly where I am. Okay, there's no lying behind it. There's no bias. There is no manual intervention that can make the project look better or worse or whatever the case is. Also, if you look at my other release, and this is only available for the Premier version, it also has this Gantt chart looking which shows your cycles, when are they going to get finished, and it's really a nice block versus timeline view here. And you can always reschedule these cycles to your will. So they're not baseline to anything. They're not rigid. You can always, everything in here can be modified. So the fact that you link requirements to specific cycles, to specific releases, gives you and the project manager this view, which otherwise you wouldn't be able to get from anything else except for maybe Excel, where you're going to go and do your own thing. And this will actually tell you how much of time you require for each individual cycle and whether you're going to make it or not. You can put milestones, and on those milestones you can have scorecards, and the scorecards you can set up to show you whatever you want. So for instance, in this particular scorecard, I'm looking at how many requirements have been reviewed out of the total number of requirements. It doesn't show you have 362 requirements here. It just shows you the percentages, how much of X number of requirements you have actually set as reviewed. Okay, the whole review thing happens by the end user in our presentation. Okay, and I'm going to show you now quickly how the tester extracts testing requirements, uses version control, and then how the end user comes in and reviews all the functional testing requirements. Okay, so now I'm the tester. I want to create test cases for this particular cycle. For this particular requirement. Let's just take Melvin's requirement in here. It's as easy as going down and just saying converting to tests here. So just select convert to tests. It will automatically link the test cases to my requirements, and voila, it's already there in the test plan. So I already have a test case that is linked to my requirement. Okay, conversion finished. So I have the BA coming in, capturing the functional requirements, and then I have the developer coming in and putting his comments, adding development time. I have the test manager coming in and looking at how much of time it is required for all of the requirements running around. Then I have the tester coming through and actually doing the groundwork, whereby he or she now starts creating test cases and associating them with requirements. Once that happens, the tester then starts executing test cases, and once the test cases are being executed, then your requirements will show as failed, passed, and not applicable, and so on and so forth. So therefore, you get back to the original point where you want to see this feature, this requirement for this feature, has it been passed or has it been failed in testing? That's all there is to it at the end of the day. That's how it works. You also have the end users coming through into your in quality sensor, and usually we do this for UAT, and they will come in and they will check that the requirement is exactly what they needed for the day-to-day use, and then they will do something like going in here into the reviewed section and say reviewed, okay, checking it out, adding their comments, and so on and so forth. Okay, so they will have to review, if you have this process in place, they will have to review the requirements before they even go into UAT, before hopefully development happens and before the testing happens as well. So these are the types of things that one would do in Quality Center. Okay, so we were left off on the slide deck. We were left off with the end user looking at functional and testing requirements, reviewing them. I've just chosen a review in there, and that was it. Now the test manager will go back, make use of the dashboards, report on coverage, report on quality, and so on and so forth. The only thing I haven't showed you so far is the version control, and that would be, if I go into version control here, let's take this one for instance. This is a particular requirement which follows the same rule and the same principles as before. If you go into the history tab, you will have the different versions between the check-in and check-outs, and you can take two different versions, select two of these two different versions, click compare. If you choose show only change from the drop down, it will only show you that description has changed at the bottom as well as the comments. Description, okay, you don't have to see it right now, but there's, okay, well, there we go. There's more additional information here. The comments, what changed from what to what, and so on and so forth. So using version control gives you that visibility. Whatever you want to do, whatever you want to do with your requirements, you will always have the capacity of going back, the ability to go back, compare against previous versions, or simply checking out a different version back to life. So if I want now version 2 to be the original one to be now my current version, I'll just simply select version 2 here, check out, it'll create version 5 now, which is going to have the same values and the same data in there as version 2. So that's pretty much what it stands for. Of course, the test manager would go there into the analysis view. We'll be looking at all sorts of drafts and all sorts of reports, and basically report on that. But that is only applicable if everybody does their work and everybody captures their own little things in Quality Center. Otherwise, it will not work. Okay, so everybody's done their piece of work in here in this whole context. Okay, what we have achieved here is everybody was involved in capturing their bit of information into Quality Center. So it means everybody used one single centralized repository. It means everybody is using that information and not 3, 4, 5 different origins of information, hearsay, and so on and so forth. And you know, everybody just, you can't go wrong with it, really. That's what I'm trying to say. You also have version control, which enables full traceability, who's done what, when, and how, and what has changed, which is very important. Between release-based quality management, release management, and the other features in Quality Center, such as the scorecards and the project planning and tracking, you will be able to provide more accurate information on the number of hours required, estimations, and so on and so forth. So really, it's all about what you can do with your project manager, work together. All the information at your fingertips. You just need to make sense of it, analyze it, and really act on that. That's why I mentioned in here that you do a better management and workload control, as well as the overall quality control improves, including forecasting. In the forecasting section, I would include your requirements trends. So as we were looking earlier at your pass and failure rates, as you draw closer to your deadline, all your requirements must become greener, which means all the requirements have passed. If you have a lot of requirements that have failed and that trend gets only worsened towards the deadline, then you're in big trouble. So this is the type of things that you will be able to use in order to forecast whether you can make it or on your deadline or not. You can also use defect management forecast with regards to defects and a lot more other things that I haven't shown you in today's demo as yet. But a lot of this goes into, can I make it or can I not, or will I not make it? Okay, so because of all the team members are involved, there's less silos, there's less challenges, and at the end of the day, you've streamlined your project a lot more better than just using different tools and different methods and different people in different times and dates. And you will be able to control better your project, which brings us back to the original question, why do we need to manage requirements? Because if you manage it better, you will do it quicker, not necessarily in the beginning, but as time goes by, and then you'll save time, you'll reduce the time to go to market with your product and with your application, and basically do a better job at managing the problem. So now time for questions and answers, people. I hope we didn't run too much out of time, and I'm sorry that the whole demonstration was very quick. It's a lot of features that need to be demonstrated. But as I said before, if you are interested in a deeper view and take your time, then just contact us and we'll see what we can do. Okay, contact me on theindependenttester@gmail.com as I showed you initially, and let's see what we can do for you. Okay, Andre, now let's take the questions, please.
Okay, now there's quite a couple of questions. The first question is from Charlene Neal. Is it possible to upload documents into the tool? So if our requirements were originally input into a Word document, can we upload this without retyping all the information?
Okay, so if I understand this question correctly, this would be to get everything that was from a Word document into a requirement. And that is possible, yes. So you just copy-paste everything from the Word document into Quality Center straight away as it is into the Rich Text tab, or into the description, whichever you want to, or simply attach the Word document to the requirement. So yes, that is possible.
Okay, the next question sounds very familiar to the first one. Given the effort to copy and paste each requirement, can you not simply import requirements, for example, a specific requirement doc template?
Okay. All right, good question there. So you have two different features. One is the requirement template. So you can set up a functional requirement or a testing requirement or a business requirement, whatever the case is. You can set up a template within Quality Center. So when you go back into Quality Center as a BA to capture requirements, you will already have the table existing for you there, and you just fill in the gaps. The other side is if you do have everything written in a Word document already and don't want to use this particular functionality, there is the Word documents and the Excel. There is the Microsoft Word and Excel add-ins with which you can import requirements straight from a Word document into Quality Center. That is a bit tricky, however, if you don't do the Word documents properly, but the option is there for you to do so. So you can do it either way, either copy-paste, either set up a template within Quality Center itself, or use the add-ins available from third parties like Word and Excel. Okay, next question.
Question from Karen Fleck. Can multiple types of risks, say for example legal operations, etc., be associated with a single requirement? What does the risk register look like?
Okay, another good question. I had once a project manager who was actually holding all the risk log in Quality Center, and that is doable. It's a bit of work, and you need to do a bit of customizations around, but it is very doable. Any type of requirement can be linked to any type of requirement. In other words, I'm just going to show you now. In other words, you can use traceability matrix, okay, which is called requirements traceability. You have traceability to and from. So in essence, you can add a, as you're stating here in the question, legal and operations, if I'm not mistaken. Okay, yeah, legal and operations requirements. So you have a legal requirement, which will be linked to an operations requirement. If you change the legal requirement, then the operations requirement that it is linked to will receive an automatic notification that the legal one has changed, and you need to update and you need to modify, and so on and so forth. So this linking in between them is very possible, and you need to use requirements traceability function in there. Okay, hope that answers your question. Next one.
Another question from Karen Fleck. How do we associate use cases with our functional requirements?
Okay, well that's an easy one. You just go to, if you are in your particular case, we take this functional requirements, and the use cases we associate from the test plan. So this is a test created in the test plan, okay, which was executed in the test lab and it's failed, and this will be your use case. If you're referring to use cases as a requirements, then you would create patterns of functional requirements. So let's say, where are we now? So let's take this one here. If you have, you should now see my view, okay? So we have, this is a functional requirement. I can add a child requirement to it, which is a testing, or in this case, I will get in here another type, which is going to be called user case. Okay, so this can be customized to fit whatever needs you want to, and this will be use case 1, and so on and so forth. And you add the use cases to one functional requirement. That's how you create them, and then at the lowest of levels, you then trace back your requirements to your test plan. In your test plan, you will have your test cases. So that's actually how you're executing the test case to meet those particular requirements. And these requirements will have, under the requirement coverage tab, which particular entity are they linked to. Hope that answers your question. It's a lot more going on in here, but that's basically how we do it. And if you do this linking first, then everything else will fall into place. Okay, next question.
Another question from Charlene Hill. Is it possible to restrict access to specific documents depending on the role? For example, allow only read access, allow read and write access.
Yes, that is correct. You can using the version control and the groups in the customizations for a project, you can very well do that. It's very simple to create. You just set up some rules, you create your user groups, you associate end users to those particular groups, and those particular groups will have privileges either to read, write, or both, or none. So definitely doable. Next question.
Okay, next question. After the analysis has been completed on estimates, is it possible to export this information into a report that can be shared with the team? From Charlene Hill.
Yes, that is correct. So if we look at the requirements, you take the main folder. So the trick here is to actually go back from the beginning. In the requirement section, you create a main parent folder. That main parent folder, which looks like this with the risk analysis, you would then be able to report on using the PDF generator and document the what we call now project or standard reports from the analysis tab, and you will be able to report exactly on how it looks here, and you'll be able to add more stuff to it. So which are the requirements associated with it, etc., etc., etc. So you would be able to extract that to a PDF, absolutely.
Okay, question from Mark Wood. Is there any integration with PPM for resource hours and project management?
That is a very good question. That's exactly why they have this this whole RBQM thing going, because all this information can be integrated with PPM. So all the development type that you've typed in your requirements will then go back into the requirement, which will then go back into PPM. So yes, definitely yes. This is why we're actually doing it, because we want the project manager to have access to some sort of information detailing all the number of hours required for development and for testing. Quality Center gives you that. But if you use PPM in your organization, then definitely yes, this is the route to go. Capture everything in Quality Center, everything in Quality Center. Okay, Andre, I can hear your keyboard really bad. Everything from Quality Center will then go into PPM, absolutely. Okay, next question.
Question from Charlene Hill again. We need to improve the way in which we capture feedback from our stakeholders. Will the comments feature in this tool help us do this? So can a number of stakeholders access the requirements via this tool and provide feedback on a specific requirement that will be visible to the rest of the team?
Absolutely. It's a very good question again, and yes, that is the way you would want to do it. In case you have a lot of people that need to get into the requirement section provided with a lot of information. You just capture the main entity, the main record of that requirement, and then different people, 4, 5, 6, 10, 20, 100, can go in, log in, add their own comments with their own end users, and really provide whatever feedback you require. And all that feedback will be consolidated into that one particular record, because this is what we want to do. We want to keep everyone's comments, everyone's details, everyone's feedback for one particular requirement into one single place, and that single place is called the center. If you do it in SharePoint, then on email, then on somewhere else, then you lose all the information and nobody knows what's going on with this requirement. That is why we want to put everyone into using this particular feature. If you're also using other social media such as Twitter and Facebook and whatever else, OCS or Office Communicator Suite in your enterprise, you might want to look at enterprise collaboration. This is a whole different module in ALM that allows you to integrate Quality Center with all your social media type of communication methods. And they will all bring all the information from your emails and from your messengers back into the requirements or back into whatever entity you set it up for. And all those comments will be posted into Quality Center. So to answer your question briefly again, yes, it is possible, and yes, go ahead and do it. This is the right way. Also, if you're looking at cost, from a cost perspective, if you want to have a lot of people looking only at the requirements, you don't want to give them access to the whole of the application or whole of Quality Center. The licenses for Quality Center come into 4 different types, which is full license, 3 different types, which is a full license, access to everything, the requirements license, which only gives the end users access to the requirements module, which in this case you would be able to use better, and defects licenses, which will only be used by developers to access only defects. The difference in cost is pretty high, so you would pay a 6-digit number for a full license, whereas only for one requirement license you would pay not even probably 25% of that full license cost. So definitely look into that if you want all the people to come in and give their feedback into your requirements. Okay, next question.
Next question. Can you produce dashboards showing us how many requirements have been written at the program level versus project level?
Okay, I'm not sure I understand that question. So can we produce dashboards showing us requirements written at a program level versus project level? Okay, so if you're talking about, I would imagine talking about business requirements being written and then functional requirements and then technical requirements, I would imagine, which is really project level. Am I correct in saying that? If that's the case, then yes, it is possible, because you would just start off from the high level and you would be able to look at dashboards based on requirement types, and you would be able to see how many business requirements at high level you have, how many have been designed, and then for those ones, how many functional and how many technical and how many testing and so on and so forth. So definitely yes, it is possible to do that.
Okay, next question. Is there version control for requirements like current flip?
So sorry, Andre, you broke up there for me. Say that again, please.
Is there a version control for requirements?
Yes, version control only works for requirements and for the test plan. So it only works for requirements and test cases.
Okay. Next question. I noticed there was a heading called traceability matrix. Can you tell us more about this feature, please?
Yes. This is basically your impact analysis. Usually what you do in your projects, you keep your impact analysis in maybe an Excel spreadsheet. So you have your requirement 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 100. And then you mark with X, or somewhere you mark which one does it link to. So requirement 1 links to requirement 10. Now normally what does retesting mean and regression testing mean? Means you have to retest something that was modified. In other words, if you modify now requirement 1, so you found a bug for requirement 1, but requirement 1 also ripples into requirement number 10, you would have, as part of your retesting and as part of your regression testing for that matter, you would have to test both requirements. And for that, you would need to employ this impact analysis, because otherwise you wouldn't know that requirement 1 links to requirement 10. So what you do with the requirements in here, it's exactly that. You link requirement 1 to requirement 10, or vice versa, and whenever something changes, so you link a defect to requirement 1, and then you make another comment that, hey, listen, this requirement has changed, it needs to be retested, which is the best way to go about it, then it means automatically you will receive a notification for requirement 10 saying, listen end user, requirement 1 has been modified, please go and check what's going on. So that's what traceability matrix is used for, especially in quality center. There might be other uses for it I'm not aware of. I haven't used it too much myself either, to be quite honest. So yeah, that's my answer. Okay, next question. Andre?
Next question by Tom Hells. When versioning, can you hear me?
Yeah.
When versioning is enabled in version 11 or version 11.5, can the assets to be managed be specified, or are all assets subject to version control when it is enabled?
Okay, version control is enabled at a project level. So by default, it will work with requirements and test cases in the test plan with all of them. You cannot specify which ones are subjected to version control and which ones are not. Okay, that's my answer.
Okay.
Andre, next question.
Next question, how do you keep the history of business sign-off on a requirement by requirement basis? Example, SRS1 versus SRS 1.5. Which version of the requirements was signed off on SRS 1 versus 1.5?
Okay, that is the reason why I said that you need to have in your version control, you need to have, well, let me just go down here and check this one out. So if you look on the history, on the versions, you see who was modified by. Okay, if you look at my screen, in between, let's say your SRS1 is here and SRS2 is here, version 1 and version 2. And, okay, I hear a lot of static in, yeah, there's a lot of noise in the background. Okay, so the differences between versions, version 1 and version 2, especially for sign-off, can be highlighted by you creating an additional field called sign-off. That particular field can only be taken from value 0 to value 1, or value not signed off to value signed off by a particular person that needs to sign off from your from your team. So in your case, you have John that needs to sign off SRS1. So he will go with version control now in Quality Center. He will review everything that it is to review on the requirements, on the requirement details and everything else, and he will change that field sign off. I showed it earlier as reviewed. He will change that field to signed off, and he will check out. He will check in the document. Now you'll have two different versions, and you will notice that the value for that particular sign off field has been changed from not signed off to signed off. That is the only simplest way to do it. There are other ways to do it via the workflow with electronic signature and whoever else signs off via email. So there is a possibility of doing that, but that's a bit more complicated. If you want to use version control, this is the way to do it. Set up a customized field, signed off, and indicate with that whether it was signed off and reviewed by a particular person or not. That's pretty much how it works. Okay, next question.
Next question from Michael Pilava. Did you notice any major step forward in ALM 11.5 compared to the former version 11?
Okay. Functional wise, I would say not. Everything that I was able to do in 11 can be done in 11.5. The only differences are with Sprinter. Sprinter has new functionality, and it allows you to create scripts straight from your execution. So that's a very, very big step forward for exploratory testing. Also, 11.5 uses a different application server, so we're looking at the technical backend. It uses Jetty instead of JBoss, and Jetty apparently is far more better in terms of resource consumption. So if you have a lot of licenses being used and a lot of users, you would actually benefit of using Jetty over JBoss by using less resources. It's pretty much that's what it is. Also in 11.5, if you have performance center, if you have people that are using a load runner in QTP, that's the biggest hit for them because they have a feature which is called lab management. If I'm going to go out of here, you will see now on the main screen, you have your normal QC startup, and then you have lab management. And the lab management is pretty much a diary, a calendar of all your testing resources, all your VMs that you're running your scripts on. And it's pretty awesome because you can actually get to book which particular virtual machine you want to run a script on, and then you don't have to clash with other teams who are trying to run on the same date and at the same time stuff on that particular virtual machine. So lab management, I would say, very important. Then what did I say? Sprinter, and there's a whole lot. Oh yes, and business views. I forgot to mention business views. It actually allows you to create SQL queries and better graphs than 11, which is far more better because you don't need access to the backend to the database. You can create using you can create your reports using business views. And as such, I'll show you exactly what I mean by that. Okay, let's move on to the next question while I log in and show business views. But these are there's about 3 or 4 different things that are new in 11.5. If you drop me an email, I'll send you a PDF with what's new. And there's also another webinar that Ashur run. I think it was last week. And they've also highlighted what's new and what's better in 11.5. So drop me a mail. I'll be happy to send you all the stuff that I have. Okay, Andre, next question.
How do you link functional spec in ALM to business requirement in Calibre?
Oh, sorry, say that again. What was the question?
How do you link functional specs in ALM to business requirement in Calibre?
Not sure what Calibre is actually, but if it's a third-party application, you can use the workflow. So Code Center has an open API, which is the application programming interface. So you can actually write some scripts and you can link in between. I'm sure that they can be done, but since I've never heard of Calibre, I'll just restrict my comments to that. Now for the previous question, sorry, I need to go to the previous question. I'm just going to show you how the business views look like. It has a third dimension. Normally, when you do your graphs and your reports in Quality Center in version 11 and 10 and backwards, you're looking at 2 dimensions, X and Y, X-axis and Y-axis, and you're looking at requirements versus direct cover status versus requirement type, for instance. Using business views, you can actually let's look at requirements coverage, and this is actually, if you can view my screen. Yeah, you can do it now. You're actually creating a SQL query builder here, and you're creating a SQL query to come up with your requirements the way you want them to, just like this at the bottom. Okay, and that's far more better because you can create far more better detailed reports that you don't have to just extrapolate from the normal graphs and dashboard. So business views is definitely one strong point. Okay, next question.
Okay, is there an email workflow? Is there an email workflow to identify when the next resource can begin their piece of work?
Not by default, but you can do it definitely. So in essence, if you set up your workflow, remember I told you in my previous webinar that you need to set up proper workflow. So now Melvin goes in. Once he checks in the particular requirement, the particular record. You set up, it's very quick, very easy to set up. Once he clicks the check-in button and says OK, an email will automatically be sent to the next guy, to Kevin, saying, hey, listen, Melvin has just checked in this requirement, go check it out. Kevin goes in, checks it in, checks it out, does whatever he needs to do there. Then once he checks it out, then he'll go to the next group, and the next group, and the next group, and so on and so forth. So definitely, yes, you can use a workflow to manage your requirements using the workflow in the backend. Okay, next question, Andre.
Does the developer enter technical specs in ALM?
I don't see why not. I mean, it's up to the project what they want to include in there. If you want to have a complete repository instead of using just, I don't know, SharePoint or any type of wiki type of pages, the developers can just go in and attach pretty much whatever they want to in there. User diagrams and enterprise architect diagrams and whatever else they want to into the requirements. Just attach the whole document. Or simply attach URLs to these other means of other media for hosting this type of information, like the SharePoint site and whatever else I mentioned earlier. So to answer your question, yes, you can attach whatever you want to in there. It's strictly up to you and how you want to work with it. Okay, next question.
Question from James Laspada. I have a question about your version control in the project and the use of any QTP. Have you witnessed any issues with QTP not checking in properly?
No, I haven't used version control with QTP, mostly because I'm a manual tester myself. But what I do know is that the teams are using it like crazy in my previous site. So they're using version control in all their projects with QTP because it saves the versions and it saves the test scripts with different modifications for the different versions. I don't know of any issues with QTP not checking out or checking in properly, but I don't know. I don't know how to answer that question, unfortunately. Okay, next question, Andre.
Okay, next question. Is it best to handle interfaces, for example, other applications to integrate with, as requirements or tests or as sub-requirements?
Oh, that's a good question. Tough one as well. You basically set up your requirement types from the get-go. If you start setting up requirement types in the middle of your project, you'll not end up very well, and very far. So you set up your requirement types as interfaces, for instance, and you know that you have business, you have functional, you have interfaces. You can even have requirements for databases. You can even have whatever you want. So the key point is you can customize it until thy kingdom come. Customize it in such a way that it makes sense to you and that you can report on. And you will have a winning solution no matter what types you are going to be using. Hope that answers your question. Okay. Next question, Andre. Excuse me.
Okay, now that covers all the questions.
Oh, phew. I was hoping so. We've gone over half an hour now.
Yes.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you guys for participating. We will be circulating this document with all the questions back to you in a few days, along with the link for the recording. And if you have any questions whatsoever that you want to answer, and if you want to learn more, or if you want us to present more and to get other topics of discussion out in the open, please do so. Please let us know. Use the survey. Email us directly. As I said before, use our email addresses, and we will get back to you and we'll organize everything you need. All right. So thank you very much, everyone, and have a splendid rest of the day.